Let's talk about prospects. That's what you're known for. There's a lot of obviously really good prospects in the Canucks pool that they've actually, it's pretty remarkable what they've been able to do since Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford took over and building that up, because they didn't have any prospects before because, you know, the previous regime was trading them all or trading picks. And so it was kind of bare bones down there. And obviously being in Abbotsford has certainly helped that situation as well, as opposed to being in Utica. I think the name that everyone's wondering about is Vasily Podkolzin. You signed Spong. You have, you know, a lot of forwards that they have options for. I think most assume, and I would assume you feel as well, is this kind of make or break for Podkolzin this season, because I think we're, you know, for a first round pick, you got to kind of show up at this point, I think, and show the coaches something more.
Absolutely. You hate to say it for a 23-year-old, you know, it's a make or break season, but just given his pedigree and what, you know, he should be doing at this point, I do think it's a make or break. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting for a few names, though. Like Nils Hoglander is another name with the Sprong sign that I don't, you know, what happens with him. But specifically with Podkolzin, I think at this point we're pretty sure of what he is, and it's probably in the bottom six, at least to start with. And so he's going to be fighting out with DiGiuseppe and Kiefer Sherwood. And as of right now, we all loved what Kiefer Sherwood brought last year. So it's going to be a big fight for him. And you know, he's a bit of a weird prospect in that there's times where there's flashes where his true self comes out and he just looks like a beast on the ice, and you know, he looks like what we thought he can do, but then it seems like he's always unsure of himself. And my issue is there's just the offense. I'm pretty convinced that the offense just isn't there. I watched every single Abbotsford game last year, and although he was good and he was shooting a ton and there was moments where he showed that he was that power forward that we're all hoping for, it's still, given his pedigree, it still just wasn't, you know, that boom that we all had hoped, even at the AHL level. So I just think overall we're probably, you know, the top 6 days are over, and so we're just hoping that he can carve out that bottom 6. But I don't know, it's going to be a big battle for him. And as I mentioned, the same goes with Nils Hoglander. I'm not really sure what they do, and I'm sorry if you're going to ask this, but I'm not sure what they do with Hoglander at this point. Like, does he start with Pettersson and then Sprong's on the fourth line? Because I think at this point, you're probably safe to say that Garland's going to stick with Dakota Joshua, maybe.
Yeah, keep that line together, yeah.
Exactly. Brock Besser with JT Miller. So it's basically Hoglander's either playing fourth line or first line, or with Pettersson, sorry. And, you know, who knows what happens. So it's a good problem to have. It's a problem that we're not used to having, or for the club to have. And so it's going to be interesting. I don't know.
Well, and then my question then too is, like, how short of a leash do you think it is? Is it like at a training camp you think we could see a trade? Remember that happened with Olli Juolevi a few years ago, where it's like, okay, we got to see what you can do, and they were just like, okay, enough's enough. We're going to trade you, Florida. Do you see it being that quick, or do you think they will give him a bit of time in the AHL and see how this overall season goes?
I don't think it's going to be right out of the camp. I think he's young enough and he's strong enough that they could probably keep him on the leash. I don't know if he'll go back to Abbotsford. I mean, he does have to pass waivers now, so
that's right.
Yeah. There's always do you want to lose him for nothing? I don't think so. I think he's still got some pedigree left. He's still young. I mean, we talk about make or break season. He's still a young kid. It's just, you know, we at some point we got to see something, right? So I don't think they let him go right away. I think they let him marinate. If he doesn't carve out that fourth line role, maybe he sits on the bench for a little bit, and they have that in and out with Sherwood maybe for a little bit, and just see what he can do. And then if by, you know, trade deadline, I do think their ultimate plan, this is just my personal belief, is that they'll probably go after hopefully maybe a defenseman at the trade deadline, maybe carve out a couple more moves depending on how the season goes for them. And so maybe by trade deadline, whether it's Hoglander or Podkolzin, those are kind of your trade baits that we're hoping that someone will take on that young potential.
Well, and the hope too is that they do kind of work out a bit, and maybe there is some trade value with either of them, and they're on such cheap contracts that could be appealing. Remember, that was one of the talks last year with Hoglander. It's like, he doesn't cost that much, right? So if you're a cap crunch team, which a lot of teams are, that could be a bit of trade bait as well. So I'm interested with that. So we talked about Hoglander and Podkolzin. Are there any other players you think it's kind of make or break in the prospect pool? Even on the Abbotsford side of things, we saw Aiden McDonough, the Canucks not qualify him. He's off to, I believe, Columbus. Are there any other players that sort of fit that mold that you think it's kind of make or break for them as well?
Not too much. I don't know too much for, you know, the NHL side of things. Yeah. One prospect that I'm it's kind of make or break for me is Danila Klimovich.
I was just going to bring him up. Yeah.
Like it's a bit of a tough season for him. Like it's easy to just kind of crap on him and just say that, you know, he's a bust. He's done, blah, blah, blah. But it's also kind of a tough year to gauge with him because there was some injuries, and while he was in the lineup, he wasn't very good. Full disclosure, he wasn't good. You kind of have to give him, I feel like you have to give him a bit of a leash from last year. It was a tough year through and through. No confidence. You could just tell when he was in the lineup, he wasn't getting a lot of minutes, and he just looked like a shell of a prospect. Night and day from what we saw the year before, though. What we saw the year before, when he's at his best, he's a pest out there. He's got a shot. He can score. Last year, Colleton didn't have him on the power play. In the minuscule little stretch that he was on the power play, he actually scored goals. That's where Klimovich has to be playing. From what I'm sensing from Klimovich is he kind of wears his heart in his sleeve. He seems like a bit of an emotional player. He needs to go through those ebbs and flows, and he needs to be picked up. So if he's going through a struggle, instead of either keeping him off the lineup or in a fourth line sheltered role with 6 minutes per game, you need to be playing him with the Arshdeep Baineses of the world and, getting him some goals. So for me, he's my he needs to have a big year down in Abbotsford. But in terms of NHL, I'm not too concerned with any of them. They're all relatively young, and most of them are kind of tweeners. As it is, you could say maybe Atu Ratu is someone that I would also like to see a little bit more. I'm personally in the camp that I don't believe he's ready for NHL this year. I do think he will be very soon. I didn't see enough of that driving play from him last year for me to warrant any. Looking at this Vancouver team, I just don't see any fit for him to just slide in immediately. So he's another player that I don't think it's like a boom or bust type season, but I am hoping to see a bit more elevated play from him this year as now a second year veteran on that Abbotsford team.
By the way, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't Klimovich a Dan Milstein client? Because I heard someone say that there's no more Dan Milstein clients on the Canucks, but I thought he was.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So not totally gone. Obviously, Kuzmenko and Ilya Mikheyev being shifted off. So the assistant, the joke about him being the assistant GM still is somewhat intact with that as well. What did you make of the hire of Manny Malhotra as someone who loved that 2011 team? I'm really glad to see him back with the organization. I think people also forget he was an assistant coach of the Canucks as well. So I think that's a great fit. What was your thoughts on hiring Manny as a head coach?
Yeah, love it. It's hard to knock that one. And, after talking to him, I got to speak to him at development camp, and he just seems to fit the bill. Obviously, as a new coach, everyone's going to say the right things and, give all their hopes and dreams at development camp. But I think it's a great hire. What I'm hoping for is that he sticks to his guns on, developing these players. It's kind of tough. I felt at the end of last year, the AHL is a tough place to be, right? Because it's a developmental league, but you're also still trying to gun for that NHL job. Obviously, we saw with Colleton last year, he goes out and gets that NHL job. So you wonder if there was a bit of him just trying to keep his job going last year, because there was a few times where I just felt there probably could have been a little bit more developmental in terms of where they are in the roster. You could just tell that they were probably going for some wins last year. So I'm really curious to see what Manny does just in terms of the makeup. It's going to be it's going to be a young team. Like there's a couple names that could make the roster that I'm curious if they will, and if they do, what they're going to be, where they're going to be in the lineup. Someone like Josh Bloom, Ty Mueller, those kind of, especially on the defense. We've got Elias Pettersson. We've got, we've got all these names that could be in the lineup. So I love the hiring. I think he's, he knows the organization. He knows all the developmental staff quite well. He's really good friends with the Sedins. And so I just think all in all, you're really getting the full picture here from top to bottom, from Vancouver all the way down to Abbotsford. Everyone's cohesive. And I think Manny Malhotra is just that last fit. He just slides right in my opinion.